Do moving abroad and learning a new language seem like impossible tasks for you? Learning a new language is not an easy task, but it's definitely not impossible. And the best way to learn the new language is to make yourself into hundreds of tiny comfortable situations and moments and practice that local language. Hi everyone, I am Dunya. I am an expat. I've been living in Spain for 3 years now, and before that, I was living in Austria for several years. And I made a couple of other stops around Europe. I learned three foreign languages. I practiced my English while living abroad, but I learned it in school, still in Serbia. But most importantly, I learned Spanish and German by living in Spain and Austria. And I can tell you that I made all the mistakes that they can be made in these languages, all three of them. And I know it's not easy, but this is the best way to learn. And today I'm going to tell you what actually works, what actually worked for me when I was learning a foreign language, and what made me speak every day, even when I was terrified to do so. Before I start with the learning steps, I just want to tell you one big truth is that living abroad doesn't mean automatically that you are going to learn that language. I know many people who have been living abroad for years and they never learn that language. They never become conversational in that language or really able to communicate. And it's not because they are lazy or not smart enough. It's just because they never really go out of their comfort zone and they always choose the easier way. The reason for that is that you have your expat bubble where you speak on English or your native language. For example, in Austria, there are many Balkan communities, and one way to get comfortable is to just meet people who speak your language or they speak English. Everywhere you go, there is an English speaker community, English speaking community. It can happen that you feel uncomfortable to speak the language or you feel embarrassed for some cultural reasons. This is, for example, very common for people coming from Serbia, especially from my generation, more or less. For all these reasons, the fastest learners are not the smartest ones, but just the ones who get out of their comfort zone and ignore feeling awkward and uncomfortable. The first step would be to build some survival vocabulary. Try to learn a couple of hundreds of the most basic and ultra functional words. So for example, the phrases that are repeated and used a lot. Avoid to learn random words or very highly specific words. This can be where is something. I would like to. This is very useful in restaurants. For example, when you are ordering food, I need or I'm looking for. This is also when you're asking for directions. When you are in a shop, can you repeat? Can you speak slower, please? This is, of course, very useful when you want to ask someone to repeat something so you can understand them. Try to learn, for example, to count. This is very useful if you are at an administration office, like they will almost always ask you for your foreigner ID number or your passport number or your phone number days in the week to see when shops are open. And the best way to learn that is just to repeat these phrases as many times as possible. You can either write it down or you can have some summary in your head, like which are the most useful phrases, and then just repeat them for yourself or use them on everyday basis as much as possible. The second step would be to start to have a daily micro conversations. And this can be done in basically any life situations. Like if you go to a local grocery shop or local bakery, you can talk with a cashier, with a person in clothing shop where you can ask for a size or a specific color, or you can discuss if it's fitting you well or not. if you need it bigger, smaller. You can, for example, talk with your like colleagues or fellow students if you are studying about going to nature or for hikes. They usually do it over weekends or holidays in their free time. So you can also try to discuss about that. And of course, like if you go to a restaurant, to a bar, try ordering food or asking what is in a specific food. And here, the goal is not to become fluent. The goal is just you see that you can do it. And each one of these micro conversations will feel as a small win for you. And this is going to build your confidence. Another thing I would like to point out, if you have by any chance any small unpleasant situations during these micro conversations, don't let that discourage you. For example, in my case, when I was living in Austria, I was living in one very small village. There I could do these micro conversations basically with anyone because very few people could speak English. But there was in one small shop, there was one seller that I knew that he can speak very well English. And also this is something very common for Austrians and Germans. They right away, when they see that you even struggling a little bit to express yourself, they will switch to English if they can. But in this shop, very specific situation happened to me that this guy actually pretended that he doesn't understand me so he can switch the conversation to English and show off that he can speak English. He seemed even a little bit offended with me trying to speak with him in German. And this situation discouraged me. I felt embarrassed. And then I stopped trying to speak for a couple of weeks, even if not for like a month. And by this, I want to tell you that I know how you feel, but try not to let people discourage you, the people who don't understand in which kind of situations you are. In Spain, the situation is quite different. Spanish, most of them feel very insecure to speak in English, even those who can speak a little bit of English. They will try to speak with you in Spanish until the last possible resource they have. In these kind of situations, you will feel a bit more encouraged to speak in Spanish. But if you happen to be in a country where people can speak very good English and prefer to speak with you in English, don't get discouraged and try to insist a little bit more. The third step is to try to cut the use of English as much as you can. So you can, for example, switch your phone to the local language. This happened to me when I was living in Austria and I bought a computer, a laptop that was by default set to German, and I decided to keep it so I can practice a little bit more use of German. For example, you can switch subtitles. At the beginning, what I would recommend you is if you are watching like a movie in English to switch, if you're learning Spanish, let's say, to switch maybe subtitles to Spanish. Then if you are watching a movie in Spanish, for example, you can still have an English subtitle, but it will help you get understanding how this language sounds and recognize more words with time. And then later you can, for example, try to watch both the sound and the subtitles, for example, in Spanish. But for a start, maybe just try to listen to keep the original voice of the movie, or just switch the subtitles if the movie is not in Spanish. Try to follow more social accounts that are in the local language, like more local creators. Try to read more stuff on daily level in that language. For example, you can try to read some articles, blogs, or just ingredient list in a supermarket. And this will kind of help your brain get used to another language and not just try to escape to English as a safety, but try to rewire more to the foreign language that you are learning. Step number 4 would be to try to highly expose yourself through communities. And this you can do through language exchange groups. Or, for example, I never tried, but it looked very useful. And if someone has experience, please share. Of course, you can also share your opinion or experience regarding any of these points. You have these discussion groups. So you usually have one moderator. And in that case, of course, in Austria, it was a conversation in German with the German learners. And I suppose this moderator would keep this conversation more or less on track to cover certain points or topics, and maybe also correct people here and there, but not constantly. As far as I remember, many of these discussion groups were free of charge. Besides that, you can join like a dance classes. This is what I did quite a bit in the previous years. You can join also like cooking classes, group sports, for example, like volleyball, basketball, hiking groups, or volunteering. In my case, for example, I'm now taking university courses. These university courses are in Spanish. And also you have like expat group that are in the local language. It can be terrifying at first because many of these people can be native speakers. So then you can go to this feeling embarrassed to speak to native people, but this can be very useful. And the fifth step, which is not necessarily a step that is like a chronologically fifth step, is to fix the psychological block. What I mean by psychological block is that you feel uncomfortable to learn a new language, or you feel embarrassed when you make a mistake, and talk about that with other expats. This helps a lot to understand that you are not alone, that there are many other people who are struggling with learning a new language, sometimes even overwhelmed. And I think the most amazing things that you are going to learn from these conversations is that most of us, we are expecting perfection from ourselves, but we are not expecting perfection from the others. For example, whenever we make a mistake, we feel horrible and we reproach that to ourselves. But if we hear someone speaking, for example, our native language, we don't expect these people to don't make any mistake at all. It's just the most important thing is that we understand each other, and that we keep on trying and learning. We don't have to be perfect. And what many foreigners will also tell you is that they have some kind of imprinting from the childhood, that the language learning is super difficult. For example, in my case, for my generation, at least in Serbia, we were raised by parents that were not speaking any foreign language. Our parents would tell us that we cannot learn a foreign language because it's super difficult, and only some people who can sense the language by nature, who have talent for that, they can actually master a new language. But this is not true. Only very few people on this planet can learn a language very fast or just by listening to it. Most of us, we need a lot of listening, reading, writing, practicing by speaking, conversation above everything. And most of us, if not all of us, we can learn a foreign language. We just need to practice basically endlessly. In Spain, it's very common that even the people who know some English, they will feel embarrassed to speak it. And sometimes when they are alone with you, they will, if you ask them, they will switch to English. But if there are other Spanish around them, there will be no force in the world to make them try to speak English. They feel way more embarrassed from other Spanish to speak English, or also maybe speaking this English at the same level as they are. Just forget all of that and just communicate with each other, and don't set too high expectations. Very few of us will at the end of the day be able to speak a foreign language, even our own language, perfectly. I know for myself for sure that I don't speak perfect Serbian and that I make mistakes daily. So just try, and if you make a mistake, it's totally okay. And once you make a mistake, what I do sometimes is that I try to recognize that mistake and then try to practice in my head several times to know for the next time that I don't make a similar mistake. And step number 6, get a language teacher, is also a thing that you can do earlier, not necessarily at the phase when you need just someone to do some final corrections for you, but you can also start with that. Like when I was moving to Austria, I was having a private teacher for a couple of months before I moved to Austria, who explained me the most basic things about German language and grammar. And most basic survival topics to speak. This is not mandatory. Many people learn a foreign language never taking any class. They do it by themselves, like they listen, they talk to people. Sometimes they go online and check the grammar by themselves. The first language course in Spanish that I took was a B2 language course. And then the final step number 7, try to create a full immersion bubble. So you can set your softwares or social networks to the foreign language, let's say Spanish, watch YouTube in Spanish or listen to Spotify in Spanish daily, listen to local radio, watch local television, get to know and understand like Spanish memes or humor, to understand some local jokes or local slangs, talk to your neighbors, also colleagues. With your colleagues, you can also talk about more specific topics like work related, make friendships in the foreign language and try not to switch to English if you have this option. And to summarize, you can start with some most basic vocabulary, like a survival vocabulary. Then you can go to micro conversations, then expose yourself more to the language so you can progress faster. Forget about embarrassment and then create a full immersion to help you learn the language to a very high level. And what is also useful is try to track your progress. Think about it, how much you could say a month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and you will see that you made a lot of progress, provided that you actually forget about embarrassment and get out of your comfort zone and try to speak that language as much as possible. And now I would like to hear from you. Tell me, what are you struggling the most with learning foreign languages? Which tactics did you apply? What segments of learning the language or which points of grammar of a specific language scare you the most? Which language are you learning? How difficult it is? Subscribe for more videos about expat life, moving abroad, survival tips, and navigating your life abroad. I also have Instagram account, Miss Expat Spain, the same as this channel. So you can check it out. I also have Buy Me a Coffee account, Miss Expat Spain. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Bye.